my mother is the CEO of a nonprofit that focuses on domestic violence, and she's a boss and she's amazing. And I have a brother who has special needs, and so my whole life I've seen my mother in her advocacy work, working on domestic violence policy. She worked on the Violence Against Women Act, doing that work, but then also being a very fierce advocate for my brother, like on a personal level. And so seeing kind of what it takes to really care about something, to do the actual work that it takes, day in and day out when you care about something.
Hi friends, welcome to Let's Give a Damn. I'm Nick Lapara, your friend and the host of this podcast, and I hope each and every one of you are doing fantastic. Before we get into this week's podcast conversation, I want to point out a significant event that took place over the weekend. Sunday marked 74 years since so many precious lives were liberated from Auschwitz. The world has come so far since those evil days, but we still have so much racism, hatred, and xenophobia to overcome. Over the weekend, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said, "People growing up today must know what people were capable of in the past, and we must work proactively to ensure that it is never repeated." President Trump also chimed in. He said, "To remember these men and women, those who perished and those who survived, is to strive to prevent such suffering from happening again. Any denial or indifference to the horror of this chapter in the history of humankind diminishes all men and women everywhere and invites repetition of this great evil." And lastly, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, "The threats of violence, xenophobia, and anti-Semitism still exist today. The murder of 11 Jews at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, it's still fresh in our minds." So the reality is that we humans are dense and foolish, and we tend to do the same horrible shit over and over again, right? These things happened 74 years ago, and still little versions of it, smaller versions of it, are happening today in America and all over the world. George Santayana said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." So here in America, a poll conducted by the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany found that 4 out of 10 Americans, 4 out of 10 people, don't know what Auschwitz was or is. That number goes up 2/3 for millennials. Friends, let's stay sharp. Let's stay wise and vigilant, lest we allow some of the same kinds of evil and atrocities to repeat themselves today. I'm not saying we will have actual concentration camps, although that could be argued with some of the recent stuff happening with immigrants. But I don't think we will have actual full-blown concentration camps like Auschwitz again, but we may very well get our own version of that if we are not careful. There are so many vulnerable men, women, and children that need us to stand up for them, to fight with them and for them today. I hope you will. I hope I will. Okay, I know that may have been a little heavy-handed, but very necessary as we remember atrocities of the past and we try our hardest to not repeat them. Okay, for this week's conversation, here we go. You're going to love my guest today, friends. She's incredible. Her name is Lindsay Menard-Freeman. She and her team at Torchlight Collective are doing fascinating and impactful work all over the world. They're a group of consultants, and they primarily work on global health and human rights issues as they aim to achieve gender equality and social justice. We chat about consulting, billionaires, white savior complex, parents modeling being damn good people to their children, and so much more. Buckle up. This is a good one. Let's get right into it. Here's my conversation with Lindsay Menard-Freeman. Lindsay Menard-Freeman, welcome to the Let's Give a Damn podcast.
Thanks, Nick. It's good to be here.
I'm so glad you're here.
Official.
We are friends.
Yes,
we know each other
friends.
outside of this podcast, and we've been hanging out for quite a few months now, talking about work. Last summer, talking about work and life and all sorts of stuff. And I'm so glad that we're finally doing this.
Me too.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It feels kind of crazy to be keeping company with Chelsea Clinton, who, as someone who had curly hair in the 90s and was an adolescent, I feel like I know her. So
And you still have curly hair.
And I still have curly hair, correct.
Did you get teased for it? Like, was it a problem, or did you just like own it?
I owned it, but there weren't like curly haired products like there are now. So you just have to like struggle through your adolescence and have weird hair. You know what I mean? It's a character building endeavor. So
yeah. But you made it.
We made it.
Do you ever wear your hair straight or just
sometimes?
Do you
I know
like
when
it,
Chelsea rocks it, I'm like, you're doing it right, girl.
She
killing
definitely
it.
does.
So sometimes I do.
She's queen.
But you look like an alien sometimes with straight hair when people are used to seeing.
Really?
Yeah.
My 7-year-old daughter, the oldest one, she has very curly hair. Maybe
Nice.
you've seen photos.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's very, very curly. And we just cut both of the girls' hair. Mm-hmm. And now hers is shorter, a little shorter.
Yep.
No, maybe the same. And it feels like it got curlier.
Yes, it does.
Because it's
like,
lighter.
I have arrived. Yeah, totally.
It's lighter, and so it just kind of bounces there, and so we're enjoying.
Yes.
Like the curls are the real. Like,
curly hair is a mood. It is a mood.
Yeah. Rock it.
Yes.
Okay, we are not going to talk about hair the whole time. I promise people.
I thought that's why I was here.
Yeah, hair. Let's talk about hair. Let's begin here because I know a little bit about your story.
Yes.
Actually, I'll begin by sharing how we met.
Yes.
Right, and then
Yes.
and then we will get into some of your stories. So last summer, late summer, you work out of a WeWork space.
I work at WeWork.
Yeah, I work at WeWork, out of WeWork space. Your company that we'll
Yes.
talk about later works out of WeWork, and I was at the time, and WeWork had their Creator Awards, and so you and I were invited to be on a panel together.
Yes.
Just to try to encourage creators to apply, but also to share what we do and answer questions and all of that stuff.
Yep.
And it was a very interesting. I've been on a fair amount of panels at this point.
Yep.
And that one was interesting. Won't get into specifics in case anybody's listening. But it was, I felt like you and I were maybe the only ones that had it together.
Yes.
And God bless everyone else. But
Yes.
there were 5 of us.
Yes, four of us plus
Four
a
of us
moderator.
plus
Yeah.
a moderator.
Yeah.
And the other two that were not you and I, one guy at least thought he knew everything about everything.
Yes.
God bless him.
Bless him.
And then another guy didn't contribute at all.
Yes.
God also bless him.
God bless him.
And so you and I kind of took the reins, and I really enjoyed that. But as you were talking, you know what I found was so funny? The guy that thought he knew everything kept assuming that you were a nonprofit.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Over and over again.
Over and
Because
over.
you had said that you're in social impact work and consulting and social enterprise.
Yep.
He literally couldn't, and you even said, we're a company. We're an actual company.
Yeah.
And he kept saying nonprofit.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh boy, it's that guy.
It's that guy. We all know a white man who thinks he knows everything.
We do. We
And
know
that
a few
theme
of
may
those.
emerge in this podcast.
Yes, we know. We know a few of them.
Yes.
But so that's how we met, and we've been hanging
Yes.
out ever since. Your story. Tell us a bit about it. I always like to open this way because it gives us a chance to get to know you, the people, places, and things that have shaped you into who you are today. We'll get into your work. Stop short of sort of this current iteration of Lindsay.
Right.
But yeah, share whatever comes to mind when I say that.
The things. Yeah, of course. There are 2 major, I would say, components of my story that got me to like January 24th, 2019. And one of them is my family, the way that my mother is the CEO of a nonprofit that focuses on domestic violence, and she's a boss and she's amazing. And I have a brother who has special needs, and so my whole life I've seen my mother in her advocacy work, working on domestic violence policy. She worked on the Violence Against Women Act, doing that work, but then also being a very fierce advocate for my brother, like on a personal level. And so seeing kind of what it takes to really care about something, to do the actual work that it takes, day in and day out to when you care about something, she just was a really amazing model. And so, took me to her meetings, took me to her conferences, I got to travel with her. And so I would say that really sent me down the path of working for nonprofits, to this, our panel mate, to his credit, working for nonprofits
It sounds
for
a lot
long
like
time.
it, right?
Yes, exactly.
That transition is happening where
Yes.
you don't automatically equate giving a damn
Yes.
with you have to start a charity, a nonprofit, an
Yes.
NGO It's like, no, there's a ton of other
Exactly.
ways to do it. But
Exactly.
keep
That's
going,
right. Yeah. It prepared me to be sort of in the nonprofit space for a long time. So that was, I would say my mother a character in my life really made a huge difference. I lived in New York City for the last 10 years and studied human rights in my master's program, was able to do some really amazing work in global health and human rights and travel a ton for my work. And it's really I would say New York City as a place really forces you to become who you are, regardless of how ready you are for that.
It's not waiting around.
It's happening. It's trial by fire. And I think that was a really important decade of my life, but also really, I think helped me prove to myself what I'm willing to kind of go hard for, right? Like what I really care about, what I think is right, what I think good work looks like, who I trust in my professional spaces, because it's kind of like it's a pressure cooker, right? As a place, but also professionally in the sector that I'm in, we were working a lot with the UN, and other international NGOs that are based in New York. And so it's just, there's a lot going on, and you have to really kind of sift through what you believe in. So I would say those are two things. I'm an English major, so all you English majors, you should pursue English as a major. Writing is, by far the skill that I feel like I leverage the most. And I've always cared about, gender equality, women's rights, reproductive justice. Those have always been my main issues. And it's been cool to kind of roll that into my consulting practice today, which we'll get to.
A couple things. One, where was your dad? You didn't mention him when you said your mom. Was he around? Was he not around?
Super around. Like so my whole creative brain I really owe to my dad. He's a photographer, he's an artist. He was self-employed like during our adolescence and our high school years, and so picked us up from school. I would say a more not passive influence, but like he really sort of supported the whole framework. And then my mom as a sort of the razor's edge kind of advocate. The two of them, there was a lot of really good complementarity.
I love it.
Yeah,
that's great.
He's the best.
Hey,
Dad.
So you mentioned, go Dad. Parents are great, even with all the fucked up just stuff that happens, right? Because no parents are perfect. Like I just spent a weekend with my parents for the first time in a long time. Went out to the cabin, and not only survived, but like there's a couple times when my dad said this or whatever. You're just like, oh okay.
Oh, Dad. Yeah.
But overall, it was just like it felt like an incredible amount of gratitude.
Yes.
Like parents do so, and I'm feeling that now with a 7, 5, and 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Like parents just do so much.
Yeah.
That never gets noticed.
Yes.
And like you even said, like that takes a lot for the dad in this situation to like take not a back seat, but like a more supportive role to the more prominent, dominant, woman, right?
Yeah.
And I love when there's that dynamic versus, because especially in your parents and my parents' generation, that was not a thing.
Yep.
It was dad, dad goes to work, mom supports him, and probably when we were younger, you and I, like, was when women started to get out and do their thing. And so that's really cool.
My mom still has her maiden name, which is for whatever reason still confusing to folks in 2019 that I have a hyphen. So she was really, I think, kind of trailblazing in that way in a lot of senses.
I've thought recently, I don't even know if it would work. So I'm just you guys are getting the real me.
Yes.
Like adding my wife's name to my last name.
So you all have the same.
So we all have it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll happen. I haven't even talked to her about it. I probably should. But like, I don't know how serious I am.
Yeah.
Because I'm definitely for it. I just don't know how it would work practically because I'm already so deep into business stuff and whatever.
You have a digital footprint as
but
yeah.
At least thinking 10 years back, like I would have at least liked for her. Maybe that's the answer, is her taking it and adding it to hers.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
Even if we don't change it as a family name, like she could own that because it's so important. And I get along with her parents anyway.
We could have a whole podcast just about the names that our last
names. It's super important.
It's
super
issue.
important.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, English major. Let's talk about that for a second because just today, I think it was the Dallas something news. The Gannett is the big group that owns it, I think is how you say it. They had to do a bunch more layoffs, right? And BuzzFeed has had to do a bunch of layoffs. So there's sort of this there's this attack on journalism and writing and English. I mean, a lot of these English majors and, they end up going into things where they're writing, whether it's books or articles or whatever.
Yep.
And a lot of my friends are journalists in New York, reporters, journalists, etc. And you said, go get get an English degree, right? What's interesting right now is I'm so into that. In fact, I just added another journalism subscription to my repertoire today because I saw that and I was like, I'm going to keep supporting it. So I added one more.
Awesome.
But it's kind of a weird world right now where you can get onto YouTube and be a total jackass and
make
millions, literally millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Like, and then you have journalists who would die. They would give their right arm to make $75K a year. So why would you, in 2019, still advocate for English majors?
Yep. Well, the number one thing I think you learn when you have to write and you're graded on your writing.
For your degree, a lot of writing.
Exactly. It's more about your critical analysis abilities. Like, can you synthesize information? Can you add value to a thought stream that someone else has started? Can you articulate how you view the world? Can you put it on paper? And can people understand it? And I actually studied English and, then got a master's in human rights studies because I wanted to be a human rights journalist. That was the kind of one of the initial points. And, kind of rethought that a little bit. But essentially, it has carried into the consulting practice that I have, that my colleagues have, and that we have in the company. A lot of times, it's one of those skills that people can hire someone else to do, but you can also. It's almost like being good at marketing or being good at web design, or I see it as a very strong skill set in your toolbox, right? And so I think there's the writing piece, but then there's also the critical analysis that you're forced to kind of fix. It's sort of squeezed out of you, right? When a professor is having to, give you feedback, or you're getting feedback from the internet, or you're getting feedback from whoever. So I just, it's good to be able to write.
By and large, people that write also speak better. Their
and
vocabulary,
usually read,
right? Yeah,
right.
They read books, and they read better, they write better, they speak better. Everything's better and more articulate, and less likes and less ums and less uhs. So that's very true. Okay, so and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I just thought it was interesting that you would go get English degree. What would you say to me saying, okay, I'm on board with all of that. We're big readers in my home. I'll probably do 75 books this year. My wife will do over 100.
Amazing.
Like we're very much into that world. Even though I don't look like it because I have nose ring and stuff, like I'm a very refined person.
I have a nose ring too.
You do. I listen to classical music and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But so what would you say, like my counter argument would be like, I think you can do all of that without going to school for 4 years. Like
for sure.
We have the tools now.
Yes.
Where you have courses and you can audit things and there's all these things you can do which is really where I'm at and what I've done is I didn't get an English major, but I'm pretty into that world and I have a good grasp on, I try at least, and I'm getting better at it. Or did you experience things in school getting an English major that you think, like you can do it the other way, very viable in 2019, but you're missing out on this, that, and the other.
Yeah, that's a good sort of nuance to this question. I feel like what I mean is that if you're inclined to get a degree at all, which I understand not everyone is, and I support it, it's expensive. It's, I will die with my student loan debt likely. But if you're inclined to go to study, a lot of the issues that we're working on, the sector that I'm in, the spaces that we're in, it's most important to have that critical analysis.
Yeah.
And if you need 4 years of expensive, time that you're paying for to do the reading and do the thinking and get that feedback, then and to sharpen that skill, then do it. If it's, there's a lot of amazing bloggers who kind of just go for it and they have an entirely other degree or they've been working in another sector, but they have for whatever reason had that critical analysis, practice. And I think that's the key.
We're severely lacking in critical analysis.
That's what it comes down to. Yeah.
Myself included a lot. Yeah. I'm trying to get better at it, but in this social media age, right before you came down to get me, I was reading this New York Times article about the article was basically advocating for stop tweeting.
Yeah.
Not that you can't go on there to interact with people or whatever, your sports updates or even some political updates, but we have gotten rid of these places where we can have real dialogue.
Yep.
Whether that's a blog, a very thought out, critical blog post, and then people start interacting in the comments. There's no more of that.
Right.
case in point, last week with the MAGA kid
Yep.
and, the Native American
elder,
standoff, Nathan
yeah.
Phillips and Nicholas Sandman. Now, regardless of what happened there, I don't think Nicholas is a victim here. I don't believe his side of the story, but here's what happened is people started doxing. They wanted his information to be put out there.
Yep.
They wished harm on him. They wished for him to die.
Yeah.
All of that happens when you flush critical thinking down the
Right.
toilet and critical analysis, because now, again, I'm not on that kid's side. He's this white kid from Kentucky wearing a MAGA hat at a pro-life rally.
Right.
Like, there's a few things in there that are not okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But even so, critical analysis and a more critical mind would have withheld judgment, done more research, gotten more facts, but instead it was immediate fuck you and fuck you back.
And it summarizes people to a tweet.
To
You
a
become
tweet.
a tweet.
Yep,
And-
because you can screen cap that, and it also happened with this other senator. Said, it was foolish what he said, but he was talking about he was talking about the furloughed employees, the 800,000 American workers that are not getting paid right now because of our president's tantrum. But he was saying,
Yes.
that was critical. I've actually thought about that. It's a freaking tantrum.
I agree.
But he made the statement, never in American history have we treated workers so poorly, right? Made that statement, the tweet goes out.
Right.
Then people start responding and he's like, oh shit.
I did
Slavery?
not say that.
Are you
right.
freaking kidding me?
Well, and the whole
I
labor rights
missed
movement. Yeah.
Everything. Let's start with slavery.
Right,
One of the
right.
biggest, but this is like, that was just not, that was
Yeah.
a totally, but he said that, he responded to the tweet and said, I'm terribly sorry.
Right,
You can't delete it because then you get in trouble.
Right.
But he responded right away and was like, I'm terribly sorry.
I said it
Obviously
wrong.
slavery,
I
said
did
it
it
wrong.
wrong.
I was just displaying empathy for the 800,000
Yes.
people that are not getting.
Right.
But everybody grabbed that first tweet.
Right.
Screen capped it, shared it, and he just got, since he sent it out yesterday, he has gotten raked over the coals.
Right. Yeah. Critical analysis, y'all.
Critical analysis, and a lot of that comes from, so I too would encourage a degree that would force you to slow down, write, think, come up with arguments, learn how to defend those arguments, articulate those arguments, instead of quick 240 characters. Boom,
Yes.
it's out, it's
Yes,
done, it's
exactly.
it's out there. So
And it all comes, I think, from a hunger to expand your worldview. And I think we can get into that because I think there are some pieces to review or to like go back to there. But that's, I think, what it boils down to for me is
expound. What do you?
Yeah. So, in the sense of like reading, writing, thinking,
Yep.
talking, listening, all of that is
Traveling.
all of that is so important generally, I think, for human beings today. But I think particularly with a lot of the work that we're doing, it would be doing a very solid injustice to all of the communities that we support, that we, want to succeed. We largely work in Africa and Asia. And if this, understanding where people are coming from, what their issues are in their own voices, so that you can then do that analysis yourself and figure out how you can be helpful then, with your own privilege, we can sort of get to that. But I think that, it all comes down to, I want the world to be as big and as complicated as it can possibly be, because it is. And I want to try to understand it the best that I can with my brain and with the tools that I have and get as far as I can with that. And, that's all that we can really do, right? Is just try our best to expand that worldview. So
Let's get into your work then, because we've alluded to it a few different times. Torchlight Collective.
yes.
You are CEO and co-founder.
LOL. Yes.
Yes.
With my beautiful Reshma Patni,
Who just
my co-founder.
popped her head in right
Yes.
before we began. She's awesome.
She's the
I don't know her
best.
that well. I don't know her as well as I know you, but
She's
she seems amazing.
I'm more married to her than either of us will potentially be with partners. We're just like
I get it.
we're just
Yeah.
tied in,
I love it.
Love it.
That's really great.
She's my girl.
So Torchlight Collective, explain,
Yeah.
before you get into the specifics of kind of the work that you do, explain, what it is and why you exist.
Yeah. So we're a consulting group. There's about 15 of us now. It's really a giant trick to work with my smart friends who are also all consulting.
And they fell for it.
Yeah, they did. Suckers. No, they're just the best. I mean, everyone in the collective is the bomb. And we were all essentially about 3 years ago, a lot of us that was when I was leaving the nonprofit world in New York. I was like, I wanted to work on, my own stuff. I wanted to move to Nashville. And so I wanted flexibility, and a lot of the folks in the collective, or a lot of folks who are consulting, freelancers, that's one of the reasons, right? And so we wanted to basically set up a model where we could work together. So we sort of combated some of the loneliness of consulting and freelance work and protect each other a little bit, because there's some woo, as everybody knows. But then also kind of, amplify the work that we're all doing individually but together. And so it was really out of kind of necessity, or not necessity, but just sort of saying, we're already doing this. Why don't we give a little bit of formality to what we're doing and make some things easier on our clients, and, really try to, amplify is the word that we keep coming back to. Like, when it's just you can really only do what you can do in the hours that you have. But when you're working in groups and when you're sort of reaching out to new clients, you can really, I think, do some cool stuff. So we were just like, let's try this and see what happens. And like, we're at the 2.5-year mark.
Still working.
Yeah. And the 2-year mark is apparently, I've learned this because I don't come from like the startup world. Everyone's like, oh, 2-year mark, you guys like still get along and you're making money. That's great. And we're like, wait a minute. We're just like chugging along like, oh, it's good. It's a good thing. But we weren't really sure what was going to happen. And here we are.
That word consultant, it raises red flags for certain people.
Yes.
So a lot of people that
Me
were
too.
listening, right, and I too am a consultant, not full-time, but part of my work is consulting. And I have joked before that a consultant is someone who charges an absurd hourly rate to give advice. And I've joked about it, but people have actually told me that. Like, kind of looked at that sort of work and said, you're a snake oil salesman. What are you selling these people? Because literally you walk into a room and you give advice, you tell them what not to do, what
fancy.
to do. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like you put fancier words and ideas to what they're already doing, and then they hand over a big check. Yeah. So is that true? And when you say we're consultants, 15 of us in a group, we're a consultancy, what does that look like?
Yeah. We definitely get some side eye as consultants. I mean, I think everyone should think very critically about what they hire consultants to help them with, because it can be this kind of
Because there
nebulous
is
world.
100%.
Yep.
There are so many consultants
Right.
that are getting away with murder.
Some nonsense. Yeah, totally.
To, just staying on retainer and doing all this stuff. And it's like, but what are you doing?
Right, exactly.
While your average Joe is flipping burgers for $9 an hour.
Exactly.
Like, how can you justify that?
Yeah.
So I get some of it, even though I am
It's that critical thing, critical analysis.
Yep,
Totally.
there you go.
Well, and also, I mean, it's interesting because our clients, so we work in the global health and development sort of space. We work specifically to support youth movements, to support feminist movements. We're often working on really controversial issues like abortion rights. We're working on largely sexual and reproductive health and rights issues. So this includes HIV, family planning, maternal mortality, sexual rights, like a range of issues. And so our clients are mostly foundations, UN agencies, international nonprofits. And so often and the reason why we kind of started Torchlight is that we found that most of the projects we were working on as individuals were either implementation support, so folks who needed someone to help them write a toolkit or run a workshop or write a strategy, so something that's very discrete and specific, or they needed, extra expertise or capacity. But it's a lot of spot treatment often, and especially too.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah, especially now, some of my favorite clients are the foundations that we work with, because I do, I have some opinions about, development money, philanthropy money. We'll talk about that, sort of the white savior thing that can happen, especially if you're working in the global South, and it can be problematic. But I do believe that, a lot of foundations are, trying to get it right at the very least for whatever reason. And so going to your point about, you fly in, you give your fancy, expensive advice, very often, each of these institutions kind of has to stay in their own space and toe their own line, and they often can't see, we're sort of able to be at that 30,000 foot view, and we're working with the foundations, but also a lot of their grantees, and can sort of say, hey, like this thing doesn't really look right. Like, why is that happening? Like being critical of a weird sort of tweak that just needs to happen. And I, as an individual, have a tough time with like, okay, we know what the problem is. Let's just like kind of let it languish, So a lot of these issues are just a matter of like, what if we tried to do this? What if we tried to do that? And so it is kind of that strategic advice, like eye roll, like you're saying, okay, well, we are able to kind of look across all these different factors within the landscape and give you this advice. And hopefully we give you that advice or help you sort of respond to that thing, and then like don't stay in that space. Like hopefully that thing is fixed, right? So it's supposed to be temporary, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I see consulting work, if you do it well, it's someone who is a solutions-oriented person. When you're in the daily grind of your company or your foundation or your nonprofit, you miss so many things.
Exactly.
And you need someone to come in and point out all of the things that you're missing.
Do an audit. Yep. 100%.
Literally.
Yep.
And come up with solutions with and for them.
Exactly.
That's really the job.
Exactly.
And it's something that they could not do on their own because they're in it.
Well, and another interesting dynamic here is that a lot of the members of the collective, the reason why we work specifically also with youth movements, coalitions, networks, organizations, however they define themselves, is that that's how a lot of us met, is working specifically in the HIV response. That's how Reshma and I know each other. That's how I know at least 5 other members of the collective. And so we're also, the sort of our true clients are these youth movements, and we work with, the foundations and the NGOs and the UN to sort of say, yeah, we want you guys to respond to some of these issues as well. You guys have the resources, so how can we shape some of those resources and then have that ultimately positively influence and support and bolster the work that these youth movements are trying to accomplish. So we're able to kind of also have some insight into some of the stuff that happens in youth movements because we've all been there. That's where we all know, like most of us know each other.
What are you currently working on that you're excited about? Like, what are some of the projects you're currently working in and with and on that would excite us?
Yeah. Well, I'm literally leaving for Tanzania tomorrow, so I'm glad we could squeak in this podcast.
We did squeeze it in.
It was perfect. Timing was actually really good. But we've been working with this youth network in Tanzania, trying to basically figure out what infrastructure and governance and like operational, organizational like stuff they need to successfully implement their work. It's this group of really amazing youth advocates who are specifically trying to do policy advocacy around family planning in Tanzania, which is not a super friendly policy environment right now. And so we're heading there to we're actually wrapping up our work with them, basically to make sure that they have everything that they need to be raising money, to be implementing their work properly, to be doing their communications, and to be effectively affecting policy, essentially. So that's going to be fun. I mean, it's anytime we sort of get kind of seconded to work with youth groups and youth networks, it's super fun because we're just like, what do you guys need? We can help you find resources. We can, bolster the work that you're already doing. We can, brag about you to whoever. Like, what do you guys need? Yep. And then we sort of go from there. So that's fun.
Can you give some of the names of some of the groups that you have worked with or do work with? Just so we can get a sense of kind of the caliber of work that you all are doing.
So in terms of our 2 foundations that we've been working with for the last few years, includes the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, really interesting institution, as well as the Children's Investment Fund Foundation based in London. And the 2 of them have been co-investing in a lot of youth-led advocacy for global health. And we've been sort of helping to think through some of that. And we're scoping out some work right now with some other foundations. In terms of UN agencies, we're just starting to work with UNAIDS, which is a joint program of a bunch of UN agencies to focus specifically on HIV and AIDS. There's a big meeting coming up at the end of the year to really focus on universal health care, which is a big initiative of the UN is sort of focusing on right now. And they're trying to think through how to get input from different communities to feed into that very wonky obnoxious UN process. So we're kind of helping them think through some of that. The UN Population Fund is one of our favorite clients for a few different types of projects, and they have a big meeting coming up in November as well. And we've done some work with some great nonprofits, specifically CARE International is one. We're currently working on a project with Change, the Center for Health and Gender Equity. They're doing some amazing, amazing work to kind of mitigate the harm of some of our foreign policy decisions as a country. So they're fantastic. We're really happy to be supporting them. And then, some great youth organizations in specifically Kenya and Tanzania. There are too many to name. This one network we're working with is 35 organizations, and they're all killing it. So, we have a cool client roster right now. So feel very lucky.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. So we could talk for hours. On white people that go in and fuck things up for people of color, whether that's African people or Latinos, or we've gone all over the world and messed things up royally for a lot of people. Yeah. We think we're helping and we're hindering. Yeah. We did it here in this country. We came here to help, and we ended up terrorizing an entire group
Committing
of people
genocide.
that we're still holding captive in so many ways, right? We've created a whole culture of people that are sort of beholden to our desires and commands, and we're making them work for us still to this day, right? Right. That's in this country, and then we've done that all over the place. Not just us, Europeans as well, but white people have done a whole lot of that in the history of the world. So where do you get off? You're a white girl.
I'm a white lady.
You're a white girl. And you're a white lady. And how do you, and I say that sarcastically, obviously, because you're doing really good work. Yeah. But like, how do you navigate? So you know that conversation is real. I know that conversation is real. People listening, by and large, know that conversation is real, and this is a real thing. Yeah. How do you sort of navigate that conversation going into these African countries and places and saying, like, we're here to help?
I would say the number one thing that has helped me as a white lady is having some fantastic African friends who have been patient with me and gracious with me as I figure this out as well. And as I read and travel and try to, not, as you say, not fuck things up even further. For me, the thing that's been helpful in understanding development aid and like aid money and philanthropy is, at the end of the day, most foundations that exist in this world exist because a white man got rich doing some thing, a tech thing, usually a money thing, a hedge fund type thing. As much as I would like to spend my entire career dismantling capitalism, I, would also like to live my life, Yeah. And you know what I mean? Like not just sort of disintegrate into a puff of smoke because I'm just burnt out from the whole thing. And the same is true. I mean, we talk about foundations, we talk about governments, a lot of development aid or all of it. There's, donor countries. Many of them are prospering economically at the expense of the countries that they exploited for many decades. And exploited their resources, exploited their labor, the labor of the people in these countries. And now here we are in 2019 saying, okay, but we'll give back now. We'll make sure that your health system is strong. We'll give to NGOs that you're, in country. And I think that power dynamic is really important to understand because a lot of the ways that this money, whether it's development aid, whether it's foundations, whether it's the UN is kind of its own island of woo-woo, so I'll kind of put them over there. But I'm thinking specifically about foundations and governments is that you just have to understand that it's not. I don't always think it's benevolent, and I don't always think it's malicious, but I try to complicate that a little bit because. A lot of these foundations, like I do believe that these foundations are, trying to walk their talk. I think they're trying to evolve. I think they have, some space to be piloting some things
Sure.
and, improving and evolving. And I'm excited about that. I think that's important. I think if you have millions, bajillions of dollars at your disposal, you should think critically about where it goes and, the impact and so we're kind of very enmeshed in that web of dynamics of, seeing some of the breakdowns between, the folks who have the resources, the folks who have the money and the power and the privilege, and the folks who don't always, or who don't in this sort of normative framework. I don't necessarily think that economic development always means that you can just, as a country or as a human or as a family, that you can participate in this economic structure that is inherently problematic, right? So the idea of, being a developed country is a problematic framing for me. So I have not answered your question, but I'm just kind of giving some insight into, it's never like this, we're giving money to, to folks and it's going to, improve things. There's a lot of breakdowns.
No, totally. I think we've talked about this a bit off microphone.
Yeah.
But I think there are 26 people that possess the same wealth as 3.8 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
26.
Yeah.
So there are systems in place that allow a very, very few people to make more money than they could ever spend. Ever. You cannot spend that much money on the backs, literally.
Yep.
If it was the case that they were making all that money and no one was getting fucked over in the process, I have less of a problem with that. Like, you're really smart.
Right.
But the problem is that the Bezoses and the Gateses and the just you name the Walton family, the Bloombergs,
the Fords, the Packers, the Hewletts,
they made a fortune making their products as cheaply as possible, and it's very problematic. And so, how do you grimace a little bit enough that you can get through it and say, well, at the end of the day, money is still money is still money.
Yep.
And we need money and resources to fix all the shit that we're creating.
Right.
So that's really the discussion at hand. And it's coming to light in a lot of ways right now with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her 70% marginal tax rate. And you've got this other guy that we talked about, Anand, who wrote the book, Winners Take All, the elite charade of changing the world, and how it's not actually, they've built their wealth on the backs of thousands and millions of people. And then they
over time,
they put a little money back in
Yep.
and say, look at all the good that we're doing.
Well, it's like Exxon or Mobil or BP give the most money in their CSR push after there's an oil spill.
Yep.
Same with pharma. It's tricky.
It's a distraction.
It is. And, and at the same time, the thing I struggled with, and I think, this is where the insight from working as a youth advocate is that when you have no resources, you can't do anything. And I'm not necessarily saying everyone should take, what I would, in a lot of cases, what, is dirty money. At the same time, it's a freight train. Like all this money exists, it's going somewhere. It has to be spent.
And because it's not all malicious intent, I don't think Bill Gates at any point, I like him a lot. But you don't think that he never had a malicious moment in his life, I don't think. But here he is. It's a big complicated thing. So now he and Melinda are obviously like very generous, amazing people. They want to do good with it.
Right.
So then, even if in a weird way, like it wasn't made that, now you have the chance to right the wrong and use it for good, right?
Yeah. And I think also, one of the things that I would say the thing that we work on the most is, when you have a foundation or, I'll say like a powerful stakeholder who has is holding the power, holding the resources, when there is an effort to reach out to communities that are affected by their grant decisions, by their priorities, by their value system, when they're trying to reach out to communities, how do you do that in a way that's not just extractive and problematic? Like there's for example, I would say, interest in understanding how youth movements function, what young people care about, what adolescents care about, and particularly in a lot of cases because adolescents and youth are most affected by the issues that we work on, like HIV, access to contraception, safe abortion, things like that. So these stakeholders are trying to understand these populations, but in order to do that, there has to be a really, I think, good relationship between, for example, the Gates Foundation and, for example, the youth organizations that they're trying to support. So we're kind of also helping to like broker some of that process and make sure that, you know, in the process of connecting with these communities, they're not just kind of coming in and saying, tell us what you want, and then like not doing any of it, or not, you know, or like coming out with the wrong priorities, and making sure that, you know, a lot of these communities feel like they're being heard, and that there's a sort of, it's very process oriented. It's very like, you know, making connections and, you know, setting up a system so that folks are actually talking to each other and learning, and that these powerful stakeholders are actually able to influence their own systems and their own priorities to reflect that.
I love the work that you're doing.
Thanks, man.
So you have had a long history. You shared starting with your mom and caring for her son, your brother, and many years in the nonprofit world. You've learned trial and error. You've learned how to give a damn, why to give a damn, all of those things. Can you share some kind of just overarching lessons that you've learned to, you know, help those listening, help us, the Let's Give a Damn family? I know something that you say will connect with certain people that hasn't connected in other episodes, right? Other conversations I've had.
Yeah.
So yeah, just some overarching lessons about giving a damn in our day and age, in this world.
Yeah.
It's very complicated, beautiful,
LOL.
horrible
I know.
world.
Messy. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit with kind of the white savior thing. I mean, I really cringe when I see celebrities in Africa. I'm like, this is going to be a disaster, especially white women. And, you know, I'm just like, there's so many issues that are not about anyone who has any sort of power and privilege. Like, it's like not about you. And it's not about, you know, how smart you think you are, or how effective you think you're being, or how much you think you care, or whatever. It's, you need to understand, and like truly understand by like listening and saying the wrong thing and having someone correct you and being humble and, you know, just really kind of evolving in your own, as an activist and an advocate. I mean, part of this is that, you know, these are issues that we care about. And so you don't want to learn about them before you actually put yourself out there and say that you believe in something. And so I would say that everyone should really do the messy work of understanding these issues and understanding the communities and sort of removing yourself in the equation. It's funny because on the same coin, I actually have a conflicting thing, which is that there are a lot of times where my own privilege, like you sort of can say, okay, I'm here inhabiting a space because I have this privilege. Actually, let me make sure that that's not my voice in here. So really kind of the switching, like when I have access to a space because I'm a white woman who has a fancy master's degree, you know, and how can I make sure that that space that I have is sort of, I guess, used strategically for someone who, or a community that should be in that space using their voice, right? And so like acknowledging and removing your privilege, but then also stepping into your privilege and like kind of, you know, disrupting things where, you know, where you can. And there are plenty of times where, you know, I'm a young woman. There's plenty of times where I'm traveling and I'm, you know, I am not in a space of privilege. And so that's also an important, you know, feeling to have.
Sure, yeah.
And really, you know, confronting the feelings that come with that and like in your own time, not like, you know, white lady tears like on Twitter, like, okay, here I am experiencing some of these things. What is it teaching me? Like, yeah, just confronting what it even means to have privilege, I guess. And that's a very uncomfortable, I mean, I think the Black Lives Matter has really gotten a lot of white people to think about how they go through the world, and what it means to have privilege and what it means to be an ally. Yeah, I would say that.
Super great, super helpful. As we wrap up, someday you will die.
No, I'm going to live forever.
Live forever.
I promise.
If it's up to Mark Bezos. Mark Bezos? I might edit that out. No, I'll just leave it in because I'm a stupid idiot sometimes.
Keep it real.
If it is
a stupid idiot sometimes.
Yes.
Someday we'll die.
Someday we will die. I was thinking of Elon Musk. I don't know why I said Mark Bezos.
I mean, again, white men who think they know everything.
It's all
like,
Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk.
Don't get me started.
You're all a bunch of...
I see y'all.
Well, I was going to say, if it's up to Elon Musk, we will live for a long, long time. But that's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is someday you're going to die. Hopefully you live a long and fruitful life. But someday you're going to die. And in this hypothetical scenario, I've been asked to give your eulogy. Everybody's there. All of your fans, your friends, your family, they're all there to honor and mourn your life. And again, I'm up there to celebrate who you were.
That's nice.
What am I saying?
Yeah.
What am I saying to them?
I will feel like I've lived a successful life if someone can say she worked really hard on the issues that she really cared about. She worked really hard. She dug in for those issues. She was there for the people that she was working with. And hopefully there's a marginal, like if the needle goes like a little tick to the, better side. That's what I hope you say. Like there's a tiny little tick and like maybe she influenced it. Maybe. It doesn't even need to be definite,
She was part of it.
Yeah. Or at least not, making things worse. At this point, honestly, like let's not add harm. Right. Oof.
That's so
Sorry,
true.
that's ominous.
No.
I guess we're talking about my death.
That's so true. Yes, that is, I mean, death is so exciting, and like I'm not scared of death.
Yeah, me neither.
I think people should not be scared of death.
Yeah.
The Stoics really had this. They had this going on, in that, and some of them even chose death prematurely. That's a whole different conversation. Where so many of them thought way differently than we do about self-assist.
Right.
Just killing yourself, taking when you think you're done,
right.
taking
It's
yourself.
your time. Yep.
And I think it's a very interesting conversation, at least, about like we're so scared of this afterlife or lack of afterlife. I think there's an afterlife, but but we're so scared of leaving this. And I'm like, but this is shitty.
Yeah.
So do the work, and then when it's time for you to go, you go.
Right.
Like 5 seconds after you die, like nobody's gonna think about you anymore. Like literally, if you think about the deaths that have happened in the past few months and years, like one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver, died a week ago.
Me too.
And
she's why I became an English major, to go back to that.
She's
yeah.
incredible.
Mary changed my life.
She's incredible.
Yeah.
I've always loved her, but I didn't know how much she really meant to people. Like I posted a video on Facebook and just kind of like gave a little homage to her, and it been viewed like 45,000 times.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know.
Yeah.
I just didn't know that all my peeps were out there.
Yeah, peeps are
but
here
if you think
for Mary
about
Oliver.
it, like how many times have you thought about Mary Oliver today? You haven't. Like you just don't.
I know.
And that's we're a week out. Think about a year or a decade out.
Yeah.
Like when you go, it doesn't matter how much of an influence you've had.
Yeah.
You're gone,
Yeah.
The Robin Williamses, the Tony Bourdains, like these are people that meant so much to us and they're gone. So I just think death is it's a weird, wild, beautiful, sad thing that we should not be afraid of.
Well, it makes you think about the impact that people have on this planet, like the like Prince and Bowie and the folks, everyone who died in the last few years, and but then the people who keep the wheels turning, like the people who are kind of doing the slog and like really care. And it makes you think about what you actually can influence. And I guess to go back to your question, I just hope that whatever that small little influence is at least marginally positive.
I love it.
It's such
marginal positivity. Let's aim for that.
Such an unenthusiastic answer.
Lindsay, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Nick.
You're
this
awesome.
was fun.
You're a badass. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, man.
And
you are too.
We'll have you on again at some point.
Yeah.
Talk more about stuff.
We'll talk about hyphenated last names and Chelsea Clinton's hair. The
I'm
huge.
I'm in. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks.
Dear friends, thanks for joining Lindsay and me today. Here is my challenge to you for this week. Inevitably, so many of you are already giving a damn for the people and places around you, and that's great. Beware of the white savior complex, or generally the idea that you are coming in to fix things. Instead, assume a posture of learning and stick with it for the long haul. Too many people go in as teachers instead of students to really learn what is going on, all the nuances and the intricacies of the issue or the problem they're trying to tackle. And then too many people also just go in, stay for a bit, and then peace out when shit hits the fan. Damn givers, let's not do that. Damn givers, stay in even when things get hard, right? That's my challenge to you. This problem, this thing that you're trying to tackle, you're trying to solve, assume a posture of learning and stay in it for the long haul. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Lindsay. To find more information on this podcast, conversation, and all things Let's Give a Damn, go to podcast.letsgiveadamn.com. That's podcast.letsgiveadamn.com. A special thanks to you for listening to this show. There are so many podcasts out there you could be listening to, but you chose this one, and I'm so grateful. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Keep listening, keep telling your friends, If you have any energy left after listening, consider leaving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, or consider giving us a few dollars each month to support the production and execution of this show at patreon.com/Let's Give a Damn. This podcast episode was edited and produced by the incredible Chad Snavely. The music is by our brilliant friend Propaganda. Same day, same time next week. I love you. Peace.